Welcome back, my friends. Today's lesson is another war already? That's right. Today's lesson is all about the War of 1812 and the Second War for America's Independence. By this time, all of the people in the United States of America were so excited to be done with our first war, the Revolutionary War. Now, we're stuck in another war already. Let's find out what happens. Here's your first part is your vocabulary. Check it out. Alrighty. Assumptions. Assumptions are things that are believed to be true or probably true, but that are not known to be true. So an assumption is a thing that is believed to be true or probably true, but is not known to be true. Next word is economy. Economy is the process by which goods and services are bought and sold. That's the economy. Anything that gets bought or sold is part of the economy. Next word is launch. Launch means the act of beginning a major activity. A major activity is a launch, the act of beginning a major activity. Next word, surrender. Surrender means to agree to stop fighting because you know that you will not win, or to give up. The soldiers had to surrender when they knew that they could not win. And last, we have vulnerable. Vulnerable means the possibility of being exposed to dangers. The kittens felt vulnerable when they climbed the tree to get away from the barking dog. Vulnerable. Boom. Those are your words. Let's get on to our story. I have to start the story. Here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Listen to it. What started the War of 1812? Adele asked her grandfather. Did we have a big army and navy back then? JP asked. Almost at the same time as his sister. Well, replied Grandfather Lafitte, the answers to both of those questions are related. To answer the first question, JP, we did not have a large army or navy back then. We had a very small navy, only about 4,000 soldiers. To fight a war and have a chance of winning, the president had to find more soldiers, and quickly. Remember, in 1812, many Americans were farmers, and they used guns to hunt and to protect their homes. President Madison asked farmers to use their guns to fight for their country. He offered them money and land if they would join. Did they? Asked Adele. Although some people were against war, explained Grandfather Lafitte, many men were eager to join. These soldiers didn't always get the best military training, though. That is why, at the beginning of the war, things did not go very well for us. Our government and military leaders were counting on the fact that the British were so busy fighting the French that they would not be able to put up much of a fight. They hoped that the British would not have a large enough army. In fact, some people expected the British to almost give up immediately. As it turned out, none of these assumptions were true. The British did not back down, and as the weeks and months went on, they came up with a three-part plan of attack. First, they would launch an attack on the British territory in Canada and move their army into New York State. Then they would attack the coastal cities, including Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. Finally, they would try to capture New Orleans and gain control of the Mississippi River. Where did the battles take place? Well, we thought that our best chance of attack was to attack the British in Canada, continued Grandfather Lafitte. About 3 weeks after the start of the war, an American general led a small army. Army of militiamen into Canada. Unfortunately, they were defeated and then were forced to surrender to the British. Other defeats in the Great Lakes also resulted in the loss of territory in the north and west of the Ohio to the British. This meant that the settlers in the neighboring Indiana were now vulnerable. And as had already been suspected, some Native Americans took up weapons to fight alongside the British. They thought that this might be the only way they could protect their land. Because of this war, the Native Americans suffered greatly. Did we fight at sea? Asked JP. I was wondering that too, said Adele. We certainly did. That is where we had some important victories, Grandfather Lafitte said. You mentioned the USS Constitution on your list. That was a ship that was also known back then as Old Ironsides. And in the beginning of the war, this incredible ship defeated a British ship off the coast of Canada. Both ships fought a hard battle. At one point, the two ships were right next to each other. Cannonballs from the USS Constitution smashed into the sides of the British ship. They caused a lot of damage, and even though the British ship fired back, they did much less damage to our ship. It's said that some of their cannonballs even bounced off the side of the Constitution because of its thick walls. And that's how it's got its name, Old Ironsides. The British were forced to surrender, and it's probably safe to say that at least in the early stages of the war, we were much more successful at sea than we were on land. Hooray, cheered JP. The British were determined to ruin the United States trading economy and prevent us from getting supplies that we needed. So they blockaded most of the U.S. coastline. Luckily, we knew our waterways much better than the British did. We even had privateers who were able to stop the many British merchant or trading ships and take their cargo. Is this the part where you tell us about the pirates? Asked JP eagerly. Not quite, chuckled Grandfather Lafitte. Many of the privateers in the War of 1812 were hired by the United States government. However, it's true that some of these privateers had previously been pirates. There is one privateer in particular that I'm going to tell you about later, but we haven't quite gotten to that part of the story. Did the Americans think that they would win the War of 1812? Asked Adele. We were not sure, but we were determined not to give up, explained Grandfather Lafitte. The next year, we sent our army back into Canada. We took back the town that we had lost so that we could protect our territories again. This gave us hope, and we had another victory later in that year when our Navy defeated an entire fleet of British ships on Lake Erie. Now, was that when we knew that we could win? Asked JP. No. We were never completely sure that we could win, replied Grandfather. You see, in 1814, the end of the Napoleonic Wars was in sight. That meant that the British would have more soldiers and naval ships to spare. Now that they weren't busy fighting with France, they could turn their full attention toward the war with the United States. Of course, they were still keeping many foreign ships from entering U.S. ports, Grandfather added. To make matters worse, they knew the United States was almost out of money. Did the British think that we would surrender? Asked JP. Oh, they probably did, replied Grandfather thoughtfully. What happened next? Adele wanted to know. Before I explain, we need to go down to the barn and take care of the horses. Okay, exclaimed the children as they jumped off down out of their chairs off the porch. Adele grabbed her grandfather's hand, and the three walked down to the barn together. Grandfather still held this mysterious leather journal tightly in his other hand.